if you could take a moment and go to thegrowingbanddirector.com to give at least $5 or $3 a month, and it helps the content continue to be created for you to help our profession grow. Let's go back to our scheduled episode. All right. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast here at Midwest, day 2. This is Thursday. I'm here with Jerry Tolson, retired music educator from University of Louisville.
Hold on. We actually have T-shirts. We can leave it in because there are about 6 different ways that you can say it. You can say it Louisville, but that's in Texas, or that's in Colorado. It's actually spelled the same way in Colorado, but they pronounce it Louisville.
Okay.
We pronounce it Louisville, or if you really are a Kentuckian, it's Louisville.
Okay.
Like you've got a pinch between your cheek and your gum.
And you're doing a presentation tomorrow.
Yes. What's that on jazz rhythm sections, which is kind of my specialty. I'm a jazz piano player.
Okay.
Actually a converted jazz saxophone player who turned to playing piano. And I've been I worked 15 years as a public school band director. And so working with school kids that age and doing clinics and workshops and all-state groups and groups like that, you find that the rhythm section is, and also adjudicating at festivals. I find when I'm adjudicating at a festival, I spend most of my time talking about the rhythm section because that's the thing that most band directors know the least about, have the most fear about. And it's because if you're a horn player, when you play in a jazz band, you play the notes and the rhythms on the page. As a rhythm section player, they may write that stuff, but that's not really what you're supposed to do. And so that's why it's really crucial.
And for teachers who are classical players mainly, you read what's on the paper.
Right.
So now you're telling me to take this piece of music and not read what's on the paper.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's scary.
So what are the big highlights? What are the things that all the directors need to hear?
Well, first of all, the most important player in the jazz rhythm section is the bass player.
Why?
Foundation of the harmony, the time, and the groove.
Yeah.
A lot of people think it's the drummer, but it's the bass player. And everybody has a role in the rhythm section, and that's kind of what my clinic is based on.
Chris Berg put you up to that?
No. I've known Chris for a long time, and actually we're both graduates of UNT in Denton. But he was there much later than I was because I'm an old dude. So, I've been at this for a long time. 46 years. Wow. I've been teaching. So, no, knowing just in my experience in teaching and working with students of all ages that rhythm section is the thing. And piano players, you have a classical piano player who's used to playing notes on the page. They don't know anything about voicing chords. And so that's really important. The sound that a jazz piano player gets.
So what if somebody listening who doesn't know how to voice a chord beyond, okay, it says C7, I play C, E, G, B flat, right?
Right. Well, actually, you only have to play E and B flat.
Why?
The most important notes in the jazz chord are the 3rd and the 7th. And if you have a piano player that can only play that, that's the best thing that they can do.
Because I was always taught the bass player is going to play the root and the 5th, and the 5th usually doesn't do anything anyway.
Unless it's altered.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah.
When it's altered, then it's important. Otherwise, the 5th, it's frivolous.
And then if you add another note with that, it's usually the
9th.
Yep.
Yep.
And then what I always teach kids is if they're just comping 3-7, 3-7, 9, and then if they're right-handed, learn to do it in your left hand, even if they're not soloing, because then they're allowed, then they can use it and converse with themselves when they solo in the right hand.
Right. Yeah. There's a great book that directors should get. It's a really old book. It's by Dan Hurley. It's called Jazz Rock Voicings for the Contemporary Keyboard Player. And it teaches you a system of voicing that 3-7-9 and in the left hand. And then in the right hand, you get to do, then you can put the root and the 5th in the right hand. And when you do that, and you spread it out, you use open voicing as opposed to closed voicing, it sounds really good. And it sounds like you're a real jazz player. And instead of playing a root position, closed voice chord. Yes, you have all the right notes there, but it's not sounding like authentic jazz.
And when you have the 3rd and 7th in one hand, and then the 5 and the 1 in the other hand, if they need to pick one, you say, get rid of the right hand, Don't just play
Exactly.
the 1 and the 5. Play just the 3 and the 7.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because that's what determines the harmony, whether it's major, whether it's minor.
So
And
before
so,
you pass out a chart to your band, unless your kid can, I mean, for any level, study the piano part that's written
right.
and
Yeah.
rewrite it, or be ready to.
Be ready to rewrite it, because you have to remember that in a lot of cases in the jazz charts, the piano part was written by an editor that's not a piano player. So they just put all the notes there. And the other thing about playing jazz piano in a jazz band is that my rule of thumb is move the fewest fingers the shortest distance possible between chords, so you're not jumping around. Smooth voice leading. That's one of the things that as a music major, you studied back when you studied counterpoint.
Yep.
Smooth voice leading. That's the thing you want to do as a jazz pianist. You want to have smooth voice leading when you move from chord to chord.
So somebody can sit at a piano or visualize it while they're driving. Say you're playing a C7 and you play E and B flat in the right hand or in the left hand, right?
Yeah.
And then you're going to go to F7. Well, because that's the 4 chord. You're not going to move. You're just going to go down a half step
right
to the E flat and the A rather than scooting up a full fourth.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And in fact, in my jazz pedagogy course that I used to teach, that was one of the things that they all had to do in order to get out of the class. And that is to play blues in F with 4 voice chords, and without moving and jumping around. And basically you can play F blues and only move the left hand for the first 8 measures.
Right.
Now, if you just have a 1-4-5 blues tune, then you really don't have to move. But if you've got a jazz blues, which includes the 2, the 5, and the 6 chords, then you have to move a little bit.
Yep.
But there's a system for that, and part of that is in that Dan Hurley book.
Because if you leave the 1 and the 5 in the right hand, when you change chords, it turns into the new 5 and the new 9, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden you're like, I'm playing E flat 9 or the 4 chord with the 9th. You're like, I sound cool, but I don't. Wasn't it Frank Mantooth who used the miracle voicing?
Yes.
Where there's one extra note on the 3 notes on the right end. It makes you sound like this
and
piano player.
Right. And you can use the same voicing for several different chords.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's another book that I recommend. Frank, I knew Frank, and a great loss way too soon. But yeah, his miracle voicing was really a godsend, because it's based on voicing in fourths, which allows you to use it for a number of different chords.
Yep.
Yeah.
I also was doing a rhythm section episode recently, and somebody said, as the guitar player, rule of thumb is if the rhythm section players can't hear the piano player, they're playing too loud.
This is true.
Like balance within the rhythm section. I've never heard that.
Well, my thing is that everybody has a sound area, and when different people in the rhythm section, because a lot of school bands, they'll have a guitar player, they'll have a piano player, they'll have a vibe player, and all of those are chord producing instruments, and they can't all play at once, or they can, but if they do different roles, then clarity, which is the main thing that is important in a rhythm section, happens. But if everybody's trying to do the same thing, then you have clutter, and the rhythm section will never sound good. And in a jazz band, the band will only sound as good as the rhythm section does, because you can have incredible horn section, but if the rhythm section is not happening, the band sounds mediocre.
And the reverse, you can have a mediocre horn section, but if the rhythm section's cooking, pick the right chart and they sound like $1 million.
Indeed. Indeed. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, with guitar players, the comping thing between piano players and guitar players, they either have to trade off or do different roles. Like the guitar player can play a lead line, or play a single line kind of thing,
or Freddie Green quarter notes while the piano player.
Yeah, especially on a swing chart, the Freddie Green thing for guitar players is the thing to do.
They just can't both make up what they want to do at the same time.
They can't comp at the same time.
What if you're reading as a piano player and you're a pro and there's a pro guitar player? Can you both comp at the same time, because it's understood that you're going to be listening to each other and that's built in?
Yes. In fact, a guitar player that I've played with for probably 20, 30 years, we can comp at the same time and stay out of each other's way, because we kind of know each other. and we listen, and we can anticipate what we're going to do.
One of the hardest things I think about teaching, I teach high school mainly, is that when kids get really good, they want to, for their level, they want to play a lot. Because like, look at all I can play.
Exactly.
But then you say, don't and play less. So sometimes they're like, well, I'm not ready to, like, okay, fine. I don't care.
Yeah. But it's a matter of helping them to understand that you have to fit into the context and the role of what you're trying to do. It's about the group. It's not about you individually. When it's your turn to solo, then you can show everybody all your stuff. But the other thing is, you don't have to show everybody all of your stuff all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Save some. And I know everybody likes to show off their technique that they have, but sometimes the tune doesn't call for you showing off your technique. Sometimes it calls for sensitivity and space. And that's one thing I always encourage rhythm section players to do, is to listen to Miles Davis
Mm-hmm.
and listen to how he uses space and how he uses tonality and color.
And this is for every level. I mean, I'm even just thinking about school bands, let alone college bands. One of my friends, Don Zentz, has his band here. He's playing here pretty soon. I'm going to go check it out. Douglas Anderson School for the Arts. We were watching their rehearsal last night, and they were doing, I forget which tune it was, but the alto player was getting up and soloing just for 4 to 8 bars. And this kid can really play.
Mm-hmm.
And Don every time said, play less. You're playing too much. And this is one of the best programs in the country.
Right.
And that alto player, still as fantastic as he sounded, had to be told, play less. On this other tune that he mentioned, that's where you get to go.
Right.
So not letting your kid bully you about how much they want to play. Like, you dictate, no, this is not the tune for that.
Right, because it's all about context. Some of the greatest jazz tunes in the world don't display technique. They display sensitivity, and it's about setting a mood, and it's about establishing a color and a shape and that kind of thing. So, you have to be very sensitive, because being in a jazz group is about making the group product sound the best that it can. It's not about the individuals in the group, because you can have fantastic individuals, but if they're not sensitive to what the group product is, it's just a bunch of individuals playing, and not a whole lot of people necessarily want to listen to that.
Yep. I want to talk a little bit about use of vibes in jazz band.
Mm-hmm.
As someone who is every day teaching jazz band with multiple vibes players, sometimes multiple in a band. I mean, like, you have kids, you want to use them, and you don't want to say no. I rewrite almost every vibes part for every tune we do, even if it comes with a vibes part. Well, once in a while, I'll just say, okay, great, we could just use this one, and that's fine. But so many times, okay, so we're doing one. Last year we did, who's your arranger? Strutting with some barbecue sauce. That Mike Tomorrow?
Yeah.
So strutting with some barbecue. So we were doing that, but the piano player I had was a little new, and he was just going to learn what Mike had written, but it was a little much for him. So one of the things I did, I said, okay, you just learn this hand, right? But the way Mike had written the voicings, we wanted the extensions too, or we weren't going to hear it. So he was swapping with the other vibes player, and they would do vibes piano, and then they would just swap. So I literally said, okay, just play the left hand. And then I wrote a vibes part where he just played the right hand, which wouldn't have made a lot of sense on its own. But because I kind of split it up between the two of them, I've also had years where my trombone section's weak and we're playing a ballad. It's like, well, you got vibes down to low F, right? So let's customize. Here you're with the trumpets. Here you're going to be with
a
vibes player, can really help fill out a band if you have some weaknesses.
Exactly. And, the vibes can be very flexible in terms of being a harmonic instrument when necessary, and being a melodic instrument. And I think that's key to adding vibes to a jazz ensemble, is having an idea of what you want the vibe player to do. Sometimes it's a matter of playing melody. Sometimes it's a matter of playing chords, but not playing rhythmically as a chordal instrument, but playing a pad, as I like to call it, whole notes, not moving rhythmically. So you're not interrupting what else is going on in the rhythm section with the piano. And sometimes as a vibe player, especially with tunes that are like funk tunes or Latin tunes, it's a matter of playing a repetitive rhythm, playing the clave pattern, or playing whatever kind of Latin groove that you're doing. But it's doing, because the key to Latin tunes is the repetitive pattern thing,
and how they mix together.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. The layers.
Every time
Mixing
I
the layers together.
chords for a vibes player, I always have to write it at our vibes. It's like, oh, this is fine, but like, oh wait, how does this actually sit with, if they're using 2 or 3 or 4, or how many do you
How
need?
many mallets? Yes.
And I rewrite it because, like, if I have a kid who's maybe a third year, I'm not going to write just 3 and 7. I'm going to write 2 in one hand, or whatever they're ready for.
Right.
Where if it's their first year, okay, you just, in that 3rd and 7th we talked about earlier, it's the same thing on vibes,
Right.
one in each hand.
Right. Yeah.
I love the vibes until it comes to the gig, and I got to put it in my minivan.
Yeah, well, being a piano player, I mean, keyboards have gotten a lot lighter. But back in the day, I remember hauling around a Fender Rhodes stage model, and that sucker was heavy. And to even think about hauling one of those around, although the Fender Rhodes sound is coming back, but
I'm a director who tends to use the keyboard that they provide, unless one of the tunes like literally calls for an exact sound. But then I know other directors who are great, who say, nope, we play on this all the time. This is what we're going to bring. This is what we're going to use.
Yeah.
What do you ascribe to?
I tend to go with what's there, as long as it's in tune, acoustic piano, or the keyboard. Sometimes some of the keyboards, it takes a minute to figure out where the sounds are. Yeah. Where the sounds are. Okay. If I press this button, what sound do I get?
Oh, yeah, the electric ones. Yeah.
Does a sustain pedal work? That kind of thing. Yeah.
I was in a band once. We were doing "Send in the Clowns." The
yes, Ken version,
and the pedal was broken. The sustain pedal, the whole opening, so it's like flung, 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 flung. It was.
That was a challenge.
It was at a festival.
I mean, you can do it, but it takes some skill in being able to move between the chords and between the notes. Yeah.
So when Chris was talking to me, he was talking to me about the 10 Commandments. That with
the jazz commandments. It's a book that I wrote about style and articulation for jazz bands.
Okay.
And a lot of college teachers use it in their pedagogy classes, but it's great for directors because I provide a lot of the standard jazz swing rhythms, put it in an exercise context first, and then apply it to a tune.
Okay.
So that's the premise of the book. And there's about,
give an example.
Well, for instance, one of the very common rhythms is the 8th note rest, dotted quarter, 2 8 notes. Call it the Little Darling rhythm. Okay. That happens a lot in jazz charts. And you pretty much, if it's a swing chart, you're going to play it the same way. But for a lot of kids who are not familiar with jazz, they may look at it and say, oh, quarter notes have to be played long, but not in the context of that rhythm.
Right.
Okay. And so I do practice in the book. I do practice exercises on that rhythm, which you can apply to anything like a scale. You can do specific notes. You can do a blues pattern, whatever. And then after you practice the exercise, then there's a tune or two in which that rhythm is very prominent. And so then they learn, okay, when I see this rhythm, this is the way I play it, so that you can apply it. It's like learn the thing, but then can you apply it in another context?
Right.
Yeah. And so that's what the book is about. And it's been pretty successful, and I'm very grateful to Kendor Music for publishing it. And it's done pretty well.
Articulation.
Yeah, I mean, because articulation is the key, especially swing articulation, because that's the one style that most young students are unfamiliar with. And so
I always tell people on the podcast, if you don't know the articulation, say you're an oboe player and you're teaching jazz band, okay, no matter what's written on the chart, listen to the recording and literally just write in exactly what they do, and then have your kids write that in and do that.
Yeah.
Just copy.
Yeah. And, charts these days are very good about writing in articulations. But if you're playing an older chart, Like there was a young band today, Bradley Middle School, that played the Queen Bee,
Wow.
The Nestico
Good for them. That's
chart,
great.
and not all the articulations are written in.
Yeah.
So what do you do when the articulations are not written in? You know,
You
how
listen to
do
the
you do
recording
this?
and
You
write it.
listen to the recording,
Yeah.
you write it in, or you apply the commandment rules.
There you go.
There you go.
Love it.
From the book.
It's great.
Yeah.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Kyle.
Fantastic. Thanks
Yeah.
for spending the time.
Okay. Appreciate it.
Anything else you want to talk about?
It's up to you. What do you want to know about?
Everything. It's endless. It's endless. Okay. Favorite. That's not a good way to ask that. A jazz player that band directors should be listening to. An older jazz player. You said Miles already, so you can't.
Right. I
I
can't use Miles.
I'm going to use one. I'm going to put out Cannonball because I didn't know Cannonball for the longest time.
Yes.
But his mix of soul with the language was just awesome.
Exactly. And I highly recommend that
there's a bunch of
people
charts
listen
of his
to.
that people
Now,
can.
it kind of depends on what you're listening for. If you're listening for style, that's one thing. Or if you're listening for improvisation. And in terms of younger students listening for improvisation, for instance, with saxophone players, a lot of people want to get into Charlie Parker right away or John Coltrane. That's not where to start. That's intermediate to advanced level.
Yep.
You start with people like Sonny Stitt, although he can be advanced, but he has some stuff that's not so advanced. Also, Paul Desmond is another one. And then for trumpet players, Chet Baker. And then trombone players, it's
harder.
It's harder, yeah, because all the trombone players play a lot. But
somebody that Terry White turned me on to was Lou Donaldson. Like
I
didn't know a lot of, but now Terry has done Midnight Creeper and Foot Pat in Time and some other Lou Donaldson. Alligator Boogaloo, and there's some transcription. Like you can get the transcription of his solo, and you have your kids play it. It's super playable.
Yeah, and a lot of Lou Donaldson stuff is based in the blues.
Yep,
because he was basically a blues player. So his stuff is very accessible.
A lot of it's not straight ahead swing though. Like Midnight Creeper is like kind of it was
that boogaloo groove from the 60s and 70s, which is kind of in between, because the tune that Lee Morgan did, Sidewinder.
Yes.
I kind of heard, I don't know if this is true or not, that the rhythm section couldn't decide if they were going to play it swing or play it in between. So you kind of hear a swing-ish feel, but it's not really swing.
Yep.
So, and that kind of became that boogaloo groove that's kind of a cross between swing and rock.
What's great about that is, say you're programming for a festival and you want to do like, here's my song 1, song 2, song 3 for like an average young band, whatever. Your opener, you really want to do a swing tune. Maybe you really love standard tunes. You don't want to do what we call Timmy's Tacos, right? Just like the newest Latin chart that is just the kids just like. You want to make all 3 educational. I'm not trying to put down those charts, and then you do your bossa nova or your ballad or something. The boogaloo is like rock-ish, but you also have these historical tunes that you can do.
Right, exactly. And as an adjudicator, I always like to hear a swing tune, because that is the essence of jazz style, being able to play swing. And that tells me if you've worked on playing swing, and do you do articulation, style, the whole thing, and if you've listened. Secondly, I got to hear a ballad to hear if you can play in tune, play with balance and blend and good tone.
What about a slow swing like Walking Ballad? Does that qualify?
Okay. That qualifies.
Okay.
Yeah. But I got to hear a ballad, and then I want to hear either a Latin tune or something funky.
Yep.
I want to be able to tell, can you play all the different styles? Can you play a number of different styles?
And you want one of the tunes to, at least for there to be some solo space for more than one kid.
Right. I want to hear soloists. I want to hear if you're working on improvisation, because a lot of bands sound really good when the ensemble's playing, and then when the solo section hits, it's like, what? Where did that come from? It's a whole different band.
People who their warm up is the solo section. Whatever they're doing is a solo section of that tune, and that's what they use for their 15-20 minute warm up every day.
Exactly.
And then when they get to the warm up tune, it's like just their warm up tune is in the improv.
Right, because that's the time, in your rehearsal, because I know everybody is pressed for rehearsal time, and so how do you incorporate teaching improvisation, especially teaching improvisation in a group setting? Well, you work on it at the beginning, and that's your warm up. And you can structure
call
and response, structured rhythm, trading. Okay, you start with this student. Okay, you have to pick one idea that the previous person played, and build on it. It's like the game of telephone. And so that can be easily done in the early part of the rehearsal. And a lot of directors can spend a lot of time drilling notes, drilling rhythms that are already printed on the page. And, if you trust your students and you've taught them well in terms of fundamentals, they can go practice those parts. You don't spend your rehearsal time practicing notes and rhythms that the students can work out on their own. Spend your rehearsal time putting things together. Spend your rehearsal time working on improvisation. Do sectionals, instead of having full rehearsal all the time, do sectionals, and especially do sectionals with the rhythm section. Because in a typical rehearsal, you spend so much time with the horns, the rhythm section doesn't get to do what they need to do, which is play together, play time, play the groove, and get settled in.
And that's why for me, whatever the warm up is that I'm doing, it's based on something, and the rhythm section's just going. And then the horns are doing whatever over, but they're constantly
right
going.
Unfortunately, some people exclude the rhythm section in the warm up. You do the warm up with the horns, and then okay, all right, now let's play the tune. And the rhythm section's been sitting there for 10 minutes, going, what do we do now?
Well, I've learned enough. I've not been teaching 46 years, 22 or whatever, and I told somebody else like 75% of my teaching in front of a big band is the drummer. The rhythm section. It's all, if I can get this happening, then the horns, a lot of it takes care of themselves.
Yeah. Indeed.
Well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
This was fun.
It's been great. Yeah.
Nice to meet
all
you.
right.
Sponsorship for today's podcast is provided in part by Austin Custom Brass. Austin Custom Brass is the largest Adams brass dealer in the United States. Adams Brass makes some of the world's finest trumpets, flugelhorns, trombones, euphoniums, and tubas. Find out why some of the most renowned musicians in the world play Adams Brass, like many of the brass musicians from the Rotterdam Philharmonic Orchestra. Trent Austin, founder of Austin Custom Brass, is also an Adams artist. You can call Austin Custom Brass today at 816-410-0826 to learn more about Adams Brass, or visit their website at www.austinCustomBrass.biz. Austin Custom Brass is located in Kansas City, Missouri. You can visit their shop to try Adams Brass instruments and many other brands of instruments, or you can call them online, have stuff shipped to you. They work with an entire band program. You can do bids in the PO process and fit within your budget and all that. They are an amazing resource for brass players. Check them out. Exceclia Music Publishing is proud to sponsor the Growing Band Director podcast. Exceclia Music Publishing provides new music for concert band, jazz ensemble, solo and ensemble, and books for all levels and occasions, including a specially curated and robust selection of music for your contest and festival performances. A variety of overtures, marches, and lyric works included on numerous state lists await. Select music that's perfect for your contest and festival needs at excelsiamusic.com. That's EXCELCIA music.com. Welcome back to the Growing Band Director podcast. We're here on Thursday of Midwest. I'm here with my Canadian friend, Dan Austin.
Man. Awesome to meet you in person.
Well, you said something online at one point. Get a little close. You don't have to get close, but just like
a little bit. All right, let's do that.
And I said something about the states, right? I put up like, I've interviewed all these states, and you're like, what about Canada?
Yeah, man.
And on the way in,
represent my people.
On the shuttle on the way in today from the Palmer House, I was talking to a guy named Aaron. And he was from Alberta.
Oh yeah.
So
okay.
I know that's not near where you are.
No.
But so the reason I wanted to mention it was I'm like, oh, you're from Canada? I know somebody from Canada. Do you know Dan Austin? He's like, no. It's like, well, of course, it's just one country.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. We have like a chat group for all the Canadians coming because there's not as many. So there's Con Selmer hosts a Canadian party tonight, and I think it's one of the biggest Canadian cohorts there's been in a long time. Wow. Which is cool. There's a lot of people came down, but the geography is a little tough, especially if you're out west. It can be a long drive.
We flew over Canada on the way here.
Oh yeah.
I go right from Portland to Chicago, so like kind of near Toronto.
Yeah. I actually drove in. I had 2 performances yesterday with my kids. We went and did our little elementary school tour where we go and visit our feeder schools.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah, and then loaded up and drove through the night. Got here about 11:30 last night, so it was good.
How long was the drive?
7 hours.
Okay.
Not bad.
Yep.
Not bad. Couple coffees. That's all you need.
Yep.
That's how Midwest works, right?
So when you played for the elementary school kids, I assume you did not do Brahms.
No, we brought like our drumline and marching band, did a bunch of fun sort of pieces with that. And then we did Canadian composer named Matt Neufeld has this thing called the Haunted Mansion Suite. So we did all the Haunted Mansion stuff. We did Gerard Hall's Tripwire. And we played Volmage's Moscow 1941.
Yep.
So
Great
just
piece.
like all stuff the kids will like, right?
Because your only job when you do that is when you walk away for them to go, I want to be there.
Exactly. It's a recruiting drive, and you want to make sure that they come out of it like it would be. They're not going to like a lyrical, beautiful, slow piece. So you put on a show.
At the same
right?
time, you want it to be good because some of those kids don't care about that. They care, oh, that's really good. I want to be part of that. So you got to lock that.
Yeah, you want the bounce, right? You want them to hear you play well, but you also want it to be fun.
Yeah.
They want to walk out of it going like, oh, that's what I want to pick. Like I don't know what it's like for you guys down here in the States, but in Canada, music's an elective in high school, so they don't have to take it.
Yep.
So it's a sell. You have to go and do this every year to get your numbers up, right?
Yeah.
So yeah.
Love it. Like you got to know your audience from the podium. You have to know them. You have to know the audience you're playing to.
Totally.
Right. So now if you bring that set to a concert band festival, okay.
Adjudicators might have a few
good for
questions
you.
afterwards.
But and I'll just say it. There's a jazz band chart I use almost every year now.
Yeah.
It's literally my co-teacher Joey Hendricks is not at Midwest this year because he's doing the jazz band tour of the elementary schools, and it's a Victor Lopez piece called "Who Let the Elves Out."
Yeah, I know the one.
Man, it's a classic. Getting 400 elementary school kids to scream "Who let the elves out?" Ooh, like we do that at the beginning, and we let them scream and like they compete against the other schools.
Yeah.
Like that's what they remember.
Totally. There's I haven't done it yet, but Gerard Hall is a great one called "You Better Slay." I think
I've heard that.
Oh, it's a little tricky, but man,
yeah, that's harder than I thought it was. At first, I was like, "Oh, we can do that." I saw the score, and I'm like, "Oh, that's not going to fit." Okay.
Yeah, but it's basically like a funk arrangement of all these Christmas tunes. It's awesome, and like, you gotta have fun with the little guys to get them involved. Like that's what we do a thing where like I'll say to the kids, I'm like, "Oh, I'm really tired. Somebody want to come up and grab the magic baton?" And I'll get a little kid up to conduct. The band knows it's coming. So, and it's perfect. It's just fun, right? It's a fun time for me.
So a couple questions I've been asking people.
Yep.
See if I can find them. What do you play again?
I am a jazz bass player.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Smarter than my trumpet player brain. What's something you do in your classroom that you think works really well?
One of the things I like to do, especially with my senior kids, is to allow them to start picking repertoire within reason, right? But like every year I say to them, like, okay, what do you want to play? And if I've taught them well, they tend to pick really good stuff. They picked Moscow 1941 this year. That's what they wanted to play. They'd heard it, I think like 3 or 4 years ago, the seniors had played it before and they heard it and they picked it. So I find that that's really effective. The other thing that I do is what I call like the gradual release of responsibility. I go from me directing, and as the semester progresses, less and less of me and more of them. And so by the time we get to the end of the semester, they're working chamber stuff, they're doing small group stuff, and they take more ownership of it, which I find really works well. That way they start to like, they're hearing and anticipating what they're doing themselves.
Yeah.
I find that works really well. Yeah.
I just wanted to plug, I was looking up really quick. You were on a full episode, episode 122. My wife thinks I'm Rain Man because I remember a lot of the episode numbers, the old
Love it.
Dustin Hoffman, Tom Cruise movie, but I didn't remember. And we talked about
fitness,
band director fitness, and Canadian band rep.
Yeah. And the wild thing is that now I'm a Canadian band composer. Like since that time, I started writing when we did that episode, I just started writing, kind of toying with the idea a little bit. And I really got into it, had some incredible mentors. Like I've been blown away by how supportive the composer community has been. Like Kevin Day, Randall Standridge, Brian Paul Mages, like Tyler Grant, all these people worked with me. And then in this cycle, I got 2 things published. So I got a 2.5 lyrical called The Beauty Within coming out with Randall Standridge in the spring, and a grade 3 lyrical called The Old Painted Door coming out with Alfred Make Music. So
are those available for people to listen right now?
They're not.
They're not out yet.
They're not out yet. So one of the things I've learned is there's kind of a cycle to the
Yeah.
composing thing. So once it got picked up in the spring, and then we do edits in the fall. They record sort of right after this. They'll do all the recordings and then distribution. So it'll be out in the springish, and then
Yep.
kind of for next season.
Yep.
So, it's been an incredible experience to have. And all the Canadian composers have been so cool. Like, it's just been a neat experience to be a part of. The fitness thing still going, still trying to get as much exercise as I can. It's been harder. My kids are both teenagers. I got roped into helping coach my son's basketball team, which is fun. That's 3 nights a week that I used to go to the gym that I'm now running practice, but I can get enough running that it still works. But yeah, that's just a lifestyle thing for me now. It's become a pattern. Things like this are hard, where you're not at home, you're not eating regular, you're not getting the exercise, but I'm going to try tomorrow morning to force myself to get up and hit a gym, maybe see what I can do. So
I mean, you can do calisthenics in the hotel.
Absolutely. You can do it anywhere, right? It's just a matter of
apparently Bo Jackson only did push-ups and sit-ups, they say.
I would believe that. I could totally see that.
What's an older composer, stepping away from the Canada versus US? Of course, US is better, but what's a composer, like an older composer, people don't play enough of?
Wow. That's an interesting question.
Because for these episodes, we normally think about the questions and then go from there, and I just kind of threw it at you.
I think for the older composers, man, I mean, it's probably played a lot down here, but Granger's not played much up in Canada as much anymore. And I think that just that classic, big, huge orchestrated band music is something you don't see as much in some of the newer stuff. Like, the newer stuff's really, really good at really making sure every part has something interesting. You've got some melody bits here, everything. But those lush, beautiful, sort of heavily orchestrated stuff that Granger wrote has so much value. So that's something I don't hear as much as I used to. I've been teaching 25 years, so not crazy long, but not short time either. Used to hear it a lot more in festival than you do now. So I would say Granger.
I was talking to Larry Clark yesterday on one of these short things, and he said the struggle is we have all these older pieces we want people to know about and remember, but we're pushed every year. Obviously, we have to put out the new stuff. So, if you talk about, I know we're here at the Exceclia booth, but you're talking about Alfred, Along for Legend should be pushed every year because it's a fantastic piece of music. But your new piece needs to be pushed too.
Yeah.
So, I go back to Grundman. I'm always looking for more Grundman that my bands can play, that fit my bands, because a lot of times they don't fit them as much. I mean, Kentucky 1800, I could take anywhere. I just love that piece of music.
Sure.
Another piece of music I love is the Charles Carter Overture for Winds. I don't know how many people know that, but it's a 3.5, or it's not that hard, but super musical.
It's great.
Okay.
Yeah. You talk about jazz band stuff, Sammy Nestico, still to this day, he's my favorite arranger for jazz band. What he does is just so good.
Mm-hmm.
And there are pieces that are really tough, but there's also stuff that's not that hard. You just have to dig
Front Burner is
Front
a 1.5 blues or 2 or something.
Yeah. And he writes so smart for jazz band. So that's from a jazz band standpoint, and I noticed too, there's less arrangers and composers in the jazz world too. You don't see as many as in concert band. So, I think that somebody like him, we need to keep playing that rep forever.
So this is your first day at Midwest.
Mm-hmm.
What are you hoping to get to today? What are you looking forward to? Besides the Starbucks?
Yeah. I actually, I'm going to be going over and doing a composer meet and greet with Randall in a bit.
You're the guest.
I'm the guest. I mean, it's yes and no. As I said to him, he's like, oh, you got to come and do it. I'm like, nobody knows me yet. I don't have anything out yet. Yeah. And so he's like, no network. So, and I get to hang out with Gerard Hall, who I love. So that's going to be amazing. And then I'm going to try to go hear a couple of the groups play. What I love about Midwest, particularly as a Canadian, we only have a handful of bands in Canada that play at this level. So to be able to come and hear just great repertoire played by these unbelievable bands.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna just kind of work my way through a bunch of the different things. I want to check out the jazz reading session. So
Yeah.
that'll be fun. But yeah, it's kind of what I'm looking forward to today. And also we have the Alfred Composer dinner, so I get to meet all of these people in person who I've been working with online, and so it's gonna be really cool.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, man.
Yeah,
It was
man.
great.
Fun.
Awesome.
We sincerely appreciate you taking your valuable time and listening to the Growing Band Director podcast. Your students are very lucky to have a band director like you. If you have any suggestions for episode topics or think you have an area of expertise to share on a show with us, please reach out. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to help spread the word, please give us a 5-star review and tell your band director friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, our YouTube channel, and wherever you listen to podcasts. Thanks for listening to The Growing Band Director. See you next week.